Thank you all and welcome back. Hope nobody's spilt any awkward things on their shirt at lunch. I didn't, so I'm not hiding anything behind here. It was just easy to go through my notes. Before we started, and this is off script, I just wanted to kind of go back to what Kate had said in her presentation earlier. I think South Australians genuinely underestimate the impact of Homestart in a national context, and that's not only as a sponsor, but in kind of organisation I've worked with for a long time. Homestart, and those figures off the top of my head from ages ago, founded in 1989 and has helped, well, it certainly was 80,000, but it would be a higher number now, into nearly 90,000 into that time. West Australia has Keystart, which is quite a different organisation, but each of the other states don't have anything like it, which is essentially why the federal government has had to get into this home ownership guarantee sense. I think there's been enormous frustration here that why didn't the feds just copy what SA's done well for kind of the best part of 36 years now. But yeah, it's an enormous thing in a national scale. Essentially started from the entrepreneurial social progressiveness that I think not only does the state try to lean on, but certainly the Dunstan Foundation. Also, given the audience today, I thought it'd be kind of remiss to kind of not note the late Gary Storkey's role in that. He was the founding chief executive of Homestart after being an advisor to previous Labor governments, did a whole lot of things, including being chair of the Housing Trust. So I just thought it was an entirely appropriate room and time to kind of mark his contribution to us all and this space. So into our last panel now. We'll spend probably the best part of 45 minutes to an hour, and then we have some lightning sessions after that. And as I said, we're all welcome to share a Friday afternoon beverage of any sort over the road. Christy, I was going to start with you just in a Junction follow-up sense. Your organisation is a trusted partner of Junction in what will be probably the first building of scale in this new federal housing policy context. How's the studio tackled that as something different, and what's been the good and the bad?
So it's really interesting because historically we've done a lot of market apartments and we've done some student, but now we're in an era of affordable social transitional crisis accommodation. And what's interesting in that, the actual apartments themselves, in a design sense, they're very similar. You know, we've got a planning code that sets out the sizes of these apartments, the amount of private open space, all those criteria are very consistent. The big part, and Maria did introduce it, the big part is about creating place and creating community. So what's going to stitch these places together? We're involved in quite a number with Junction, but other developers and Renewal SA as well. So that's from Tonsley to the city to Prospect to Salisbury, hopefully Southwark Grounds coming up soon. So what's really interesting to us is that all of those different products in multi-storey residential are busy at the moment. I think they need to be, because otherwise if they're not, we're going to have problems elsewhere in the supply chain. But what's unique to Adelaide and what we're probably learning and still learning is who are the people that are going to live in each of these places, and are we designing the right product, and are we making the places that mean that the community knits together?
We had a conversation yesterday going completely off script from the very start. Adelaide's aversion to families in medium density living. Are we building it to show the cause, or is there a large enough cohort of people wanting to live in it?
So this is the thing I'm most curious about. I actually did multi-res in London 20 years ago, and there's an entirely different mindset over there about living in medium to high density living. And 20 years ago, they had to build in every multi-res development 15 to 20% affordable housing. Every single development. Couldn't get out of it. So there was the demographics, there was the diversity, there were dogs, there were cats, there were everything. Families. It's so far ahead of where we're at. I think here we still think that we can get the Australian dream, the front yard, backyard. So I'm not sure how long this type of product is going to be in demand. What I'm really keen to make sure we get right, though, is in the affordable product, is that we're thinking about deliver now. We've got 500 in our studio at the moment. 250 of those will be delivered in the next 6 to 12 months. But are they still going to be good places to live in 20 years, in 50 years? Are we getting the design right? Are we getting the little recipe of everything that needs to be there right? So that's what I really care about. We're not in it. We get a fee. We don't get a developer cut. So we really do care about the legacy that we're trying to deliver at the moment.
Matt, probably to skip over to you there, everything that's being built is in a context, and it's in that kind of local government context. I think Charles Sturt's a perfect analogy for this in terms of inner-room council. My math at 3 o'clock on a Friday, or 2 o'clock on a Friday, was 1 in 15 South Australians, or kind of something like that. What does local government need to do around that to be partner ready, I guess?
Yeah, I guess I'd probably qualify anything I'm going to say. I'll just pick up on Kate's slideshow before, and you were saying, here's what you were hopeful for, and you had a federal government list, a state government list, and then it jumped to conclusions. And no, but I think it's indicative. I don't know the answer to that question, and I reckon we need to learn and build our own story there. But in saying that, if you were going to represent that like properly, you'd need 68 slides, and Scott went there earlier this morning and he was like, different councils go at different speeds. So anything I would say here, I can't represent the sector. We're 68 organisations within a sector. But I think coming back to the fact that I don't know, we've had some luck not knowing of late. In the AI space, as an example, we've gone out to tender and we've said, we want to work with someone to build a city plan. It's a bit of an R&D project, as it were, but we'd love like a data lake that helps us predict where these types of things might happen. Where is it going to intersect with things like climate change and infrastructure pressure, and take the hordes and swamps of data that we've got and get better at being able to predict. And what's come out of that, that market process is we've been inundated with interest to partner. And instead of us knowing what the answer was and going, here, build me this product, we've gone, come partner with us and you tell us based on the fact that you're in industry and you know the industry, tell us what's possible. And that's that local government learning process. Similarly, with energy, we've secured a partner. We said, hey, we want to give people access to cheap renewable energy. Tell us how you would do that and how council can help you. And out of that, we've got like a community renewables program where we're providing panels and batteries to our residents. We've clipped the ticket from the company that we're working with, and then we're going to give that money, that revenue, back to renters who never get the benefits, usually because the landlord doesn't want to build panels and batteries because the savings realised through the bill and the tenant pays the bill. So out of this morning, I'm sitting here going, I wonder what would happen if we said, here's a market approach. We're looking for a community housing provider or a consortium or any organisation to hit some missing middle outcomes. I wonder who would tender. I wonder what you'd bring to the table. And I guess why would you tender? Local government's got amazing data at a really, really local level. We know who's land banking. We know where the opportunities are at a much finer grain level of detail than the GARP kind of ever would. The community trusts us. If you had an opportunity with a developer or even properties in disparate ownership, if our mayor asks those owners if they want to come for a cup of tea, generally people turn up. And that's the power of a council at that local level. But we've also got patient and cheap capital. And I don't think that's really well understood. We can borrow money really cheap. We've got our own lending authority. What role might that play in shared equity? So I think, yeah, I don't know, but we're keen to find out.
Thank you so much. Homestar's involvement today has come from, I think, to be fair, your Chief Executive Andrew Mills's strong policy role in this space. We're largely talking about rental. Do you want to kind of explain the fit between those two things and why it's been such an important part for Homestar?
Yeah, absolutely. If I reflect back to a couple of things that I heard this morning, Minister Champion talked about more people being stuck in that rental in that rental space and not being able to move. If we talk about the housing ecosystem and people kind of getting into housing through rental to home ownership and the like. And then it was also earlier on, Kate talked about in her presentation as well around more and more people needing assistance than ever before because of property prices increasing, rental prices increasing, wage growth not keeping up, to support in that affordability piece. And that's, the key link for us here for Homestart and the role that we play in the broader housing ecosystem. Recently, when we were looking at some of our numbers, on average, Homestart makes 42 private rental properties available each month because we fund those people into their own homes and into newly constructed homes. So that is the role that we play here in the market, that we can keep that ecosystem of people moving through by making home ownership available for people who can achieve home ownership, then frees up capacity in that rental market.
We're also talking, Joe Noon from Housing was talking before about the income thresholds and 30%, etc. A huge amount of your monthly loan book is going to people that aren't on dissimilar annual incomes to what those rental thresholds are they?
Yeah, that's correct. So, so our customers, if we think about, so we help anywhere between, 2,500 to 3,000 South Australian households each year achieve home ownership. So it's not an insignificant number. Here in the state, we help about 1 in 4 first home buyers choose Homestart to start their home ownership journey. About 57% of the people we help come from private rental. And a lot of those are single. We were talking earlier on today around people on, single households, the construct of households. Nearly 50% of the people we help are single households. And we do a lot with single parents as well. So it's about a 12% number there. But, there are a group of people who increasingly, we hear their stories around being able to keep the family home or at least be able to buy in the area where their children can stay in the local schools. It's such an important piece. And on average, and this number the percentage is decreasing just because property prices are, increasing so significantly. But over the last 12 months, it was around 40% of the households that we helped. Their net household income was under 85,000. So if you think about the profile of customers that we are helping and what they look like, they're not too dissimilar to the people who are seeking rental at the moment there. And, from Homestart's perspective, the key thing we like to focus on is how do we solve for the barriers that are stopping people to achieve home ownership.
Yeah, I think going back to the Minister's thoughts this morning, it's the people have been stuck, and then even more so to Kate's graphs that if you were paying $500 a week trying to save, and then that was $560, and then that was $600, and then we're $650, you're just nowhere near investment ready anymore. It's that gap that's made you block on both kind of ends. Christy, if we pick up from kind of Maria's view of trying to do 200 homes a year in this, half of that probably in this new scale, probably more, you'd argue, with half in the next 2 or 3 years in terms of a ratio. Junction's obviously only one of the 6 very good Tier 1 providers we have here, let alone anyone from interstate. The built form's one part, the context of where the building sits is another part. How much is your sector preparing for that to be a much larger part of their work over the next 5 years?
So it's interesting. We've probably done more multi-res in the last couple of years than it's probably been a 10-year gap, really, since we've had this amount of multi-res in design practices. HAF itself has been, and when the rounds have been released, is incredibly accelerated patch for us, trying to get the the material together that the CHPs need to then make those applications. So that's from a design point of view, but it's a really collaborative effort. Obviously, the developers are involved, government agencies are involved, but construction arms as well. So we talked a little bit around the pipeline. There's a lot of different things happening in the property sector. So trades are already challenging to get. So how we're going to ramp up, it's a massive conversation, not just in residential but in every sector that we're operating in. Modular is definitely something. At Tonsley we're doing a full modular facade. At another site we're looking for even more modular to be done off-site. So that is definitely something that is going to have to be explored. And it's interesting because whenever there is the need, you're forced into actually making some headway in those spaces, which I think is a really good thing. So that's probably it. But can I just link back into some of the things that you said, Vas, about that step into home ownership, and it links back to the question about families. In the 500 affordable rental outcomes that we've got at the moment, 4 of them are a 3-bed apartment. So, and that's across government, CHPs and developers. The understanding of what the demand is, the mix. I'm not sure we've got it right, because I can imagine, in particular with the affordable product, where you've got working families, they're going to want more than 2 bedrooms. The other thing that links back is to what the Minister said this morning with the National Construction Code. There is a new part to that, which is the livable housing design guidelines, which are for ageing in place, which is great. However, it's making every bathroom bigger. And so we've got a lot of 2 beds, 1 baths. If you go to a 2-bed, 2 baths, you could actually have a 3-bed with 1 bath for the same amount of area. So there's, like to Maria's point, there's a lot of new things, new hurdles to get through, even in just getting some drawings on paper. And I'm not sure all of it is helping us at the moment.
Just conscious also for the broader room, we've used a lot of terms today, so just go back to Scott's broader points this morning. So have to say Housing Australia Future Fund, the way that's worked thus far is the federal government's put 2 lots of direct subsidies into the market, essentially. So I said, if you build this and it costs X, we'll pay X minus 20 for the period of time allowing it to do that, and they've asked the community housing providers and the sectors to direct bid from that. So it's come in waves, because the federal government rounds have come in waves in that sense. Just conscious we get acronym heavy sometimes. I was impressed by Archie though. That was an excellent way to add some letters together to turn it into a name. Matt, in a broader sense, I mean, you've had much broader local government experience as well. How much of that enabler can local government be? You kind of pointed to it before in terms of the cup of tea. Like, it's not coming to you at the last minute, is it?
No. I think in terms of enabler, we've always been good at, like I've seen 5 state planning strategies now, I think, over the years in one form or another, and local government's been pretty good at responding to those and going, okay, that's the state, that's sort of the state view of housing and what's going to happen in Adelaide over the next X number of years. There's only been a few official strategies, I think, but there's sort of iterative sort of housing bits that have sat underneath, and we've then sort of taken that and locally gone, okay, here's what it means for us, and that's in each individual council. That'll continue. I suspect the next challenge is going to be to maintain that livability aspect. You talked about like the design of a house and what that might mean for this missing middle, but what does a local neighbourhood need to look like? We've been through a bit of a program to audit our local neighbourhoods lately against some livability standards. There's things like access to open space, access to transport, access to jobs, all of these things that it's one thing to have a roof over your head, but it'd be nice to be happy and a happy member of the community that feels part of it when you live there. Just having conversation with Ben over lunch, we talk about the NIMBY stuff because a lot of this is going to amount to infill. There is a NIMBY element in some councils, but the problems are also quite real for us, and we have to just remember, like, since COVID, and I saw those stats before around this is a bit of a new challenge. Since COVID, our organised sport participation rate has increased by about 600% on average. And so what that's meant for our parks and open spaces, there are, clubs that had 300 playing members in 2019 and now they've got 15 to 1,700. And I think girls footy's been a big contributor to that. And that's all fantastic. And what that means is that our open spaces are completely stitched up by organised sport. So we have this joke about the dog walkers and stuff, but they literally can't access a park because every time they want to go outside, there's organised footy, organised soccer on these ovals. And I can't stress enough how competitive and contested that space is. So
600%.
Yeah, it's crazy numbers. And you've got new clubs emerging that are looking to grow outside of the council area that they started in. There are soccer clubs now that have a home ground in 8 different council areas. And that's like literally since COVID. So that's the access to open space side. Over on the infrastructure side, the stormwater pipes aren't big enough anymore. Charles Sturt, as an example, is dead flat. There's twice as many rooftops because now there's 2, 3, 4 houses where one used to be. Our renewal program cost is ballooning completely out of proportion with our rate setting, and that's a really systemic issue. And that's if you took a linear projection of that infrastructure planning from now moving forward, much less the new future that we might be looking like, where it's going to be hotter, probably rains less, but when it does, it's going to be flash flooding. So all of these things that local government can do, I think, is make sure that we've got our eye on that infrastructure planning to support livability, not just having a roof over your head at an affordable price in the hierarchy of needs. Obviously, that safe home sits up here, but then if we've sorted that out, what does it actually feel like to live in a local neighbourhood?
And if there is such a direct contest for that open space, I guess it's drawing that link to trying to put density around the open space, I guess, in terms of, using what is there. I mean, the Victorian government's taken some baby steps, I guess, in buying some older houses and kind of recreating open space in the suburbs that don't have it. I know we had a tiny frolic here at Black Forest and then stopped. But in terms, is there a greater ability to draw those two challenges and opportunities together to say this is a greater cause to do this properly?
But massively, but with a partner. I don't think we can do that by ourselves. I think if we did it by ourselves, we'd be limited in our thinking. And that's this, if there was an invitation here to industry to go, hey, we're a council with all those things that I said we've got before, come work with us to work that up. We know our city really well. We can tell you where the opportunities are. We'd love to talk to you.
But that kind of translates broadly to the kind of total cost of housing, I guess. I mean, Matt was talking before about the kind of renewable energy component of that, and going back to feed-in laws here in 2004, probably been an unfortunate byproduct of that it has been so targeted at the owner-occupier. How does Homestart target the people's ability to lend closer to public transport rather than, say, their ability to lend in a regional area, or how are you trying to assess people's total cost of housing, I guess?
So when we look at our, at the people who are, seeking finance from us, we're not necessarily looking at things at that level of granularity. And what we're looking at is, based on someone's, current financial situation, what is it that they can afford? And then based on what it is they can afford, how much are we able to lend them? And then based on how much we can lend them, how much is the value of the property that they can purchase? And we support that through being, offering low deposits. We offer 2% deposit loans and the like, which we've been doing for a really long time. But what we have noticed over recent years, in particular since COVID and, the property prices, is how much people need additional support. And you touched on shared equity before, Matt, and, we've been doing shared equity now for nearly 2 decades, so it's about 17 odd years that we've been offering shared equity here in South Australia, and we're on our 3rd iteration of our product and our solution to the market. And what we have seen is the acceptance of this as a source of funding as opposed to... So I've been with Home Start for 5 years, and 5 years ago there was that piece of, don't really want the government to own part of my house. People were quite resistant to it. Whereas now people are asking for it because it is making the difference of them being able to buy a home or not being able to buy a home. So the growth we've seen in the acceptance and the uptake has been significant. Well over 35%, so over a third of, the people we help are taking out a shared equity option with us. So, that's how we're helping to solve for that affordability piece, especially where wages and income has not grown proportionally.
Yeah, and we now had the federal government essentially trying to come into that space. Christy, in a broader studio sense, do we think how long does it take for the mentality to shift to be able to say we're building the same spaces in an affordable housing design rather than a market design, but we are starting from the core principles of it not being sold, it not being whatever those things. I mean, Thrive at Tonsley was a pretty big flagpole in the ground to say this is going to be different. Is that universally accepted, or is that a step change as well?
The honest answer is I'm not sure. I think we're starting to see a lot more downsizers move into apartments, which is because the type of stock that appeals to them is now on the market. So that's starting to change at that level. But it's a little bit, we're looking right at Adelaide Oval, how much discussion there was before it was there. It's very quiet now that it's built and there's a bridge that links to it. You've just got to build it, like Mara Emery has said, and then it starts to change. People start having an experience of living in one of these buildings and having a positive experience, and then the discussion just starts to change. But as I opened with, there's a lot of things that these buildings need to include that make that a positive experience that's outside of the walls of your apartment. So it's things like being able to personalise it, so having things that you can stick things up on the wall. Maybe you can have your pet there. You've got some open space that you can go and kick the footy or meet up with people. Or if you have your pet, you obviously will know everyone else that has a pet from going down there. There's little things like co-working spaces that the community can come together and have meetings or have dinners. In one building, we've even got a stair climbing challenge with a chalkboard up the top that the residents can get together and compete against each other, and in that sense. So being a little bit playful, so that the community actually does start to connect and knit together, make good memories, and that's when this kind of product will be in demand.
Yeah, just in my own kind of lived experience, I live in Hurdle Square, and for like 4 to 5:30 every afternoon is like 30 dogs and 50 residents, all of that downsizer group that are just coming and taking over the square. We had a conversation earlier about whether... So there's a whole lot of national debate at the moment about the traditional build-to-rent sector. So I see that as more as white-collar workforces who are saying, I'm living here for a while, I don't need to buy, so I'll rent and I'll move on. And then I think the unfortunate name of the kind of rental stuff we're talking about is kind of ABTR, so it's the affordable build-to-rent. We were talking earlier about almost a natural conflict between those two, that the merged language probably is unhelpful, but I guess there's also benefits of both building scale at the same time and learnings where they do cross over.
Yeah, look, I was exposed to some data from a survey that was undertaken in 2023 by the Australian Apartment Advocacy. And in their data, what was the most important thing for people that are renting was security of their lease. So people being really afraid that, I've got 12 months, but move in a few months later, what's happening next, The thing about the build to rent that's happening more on the East Coast than it is here is people can go in there and they can get 2 or 3 year leases. They can also decide, I want to have an apartment over here in the same building because I think I'd like it more with that aspect for the next couple of years. So there's that security there. Plus that kind of product, one of the things that attracts in particular the people in their 20s and 30s that can't afford to buy a house but can afford to rent there. There's a gym, so they don't need a gym membership. There's a dining space and a co-working space, so they can just get a 1-bed apartment. They don't need the second bedroom for doing all of that stuff. And they tend to be in really, really good locations, so they don't need a car, they don't need all of those sort of things. So their expenses are all wrapped up in their rental expense. So as a model, it does make a lot of sense. It's really struggling to get up here, though, in Adelaide. It works really well in South Bank in Melbourne. It works really well in Sydney. We haven't quite got that financial modelling worked out for the Adelaide market.
Yeah, or even in a post-COVID world, quite that critical mass of that white-collar cohort that they're getting in kind of larger financial precincts, etc. Just coming back to, again, the Minister talking this morning, saying ancillary dwellings instead of granny flats, I think. Matt, I mean, that's a decent example to follow through, that we're not talking about this being the solution for every cohort or this one thing being a solution to, youth at the same time as ageing or whatever else. Yeah. How does the local government attempt to stay agile enough? I mean, is that how the city plan works, to be able to say, if you're choosing column F, then here's what we can offer you. If you're in column L, it's kind of this? Or
I think the role of the city plan, there's 2 parts to it. A city plan, I think, that's built on some kind of AI data lake or something to improve that predictability might point to the spots in the city. Some of these things aren't true universally across an entire council area, and I think like a tool that would enable us to make better informed decisions, and that's quite traditional language, but I think AI brings a different skill set and can synthesise some of that data across different data dimensions much faster to give us a better indication where to go and target these things and proactively make them happen. The rules for things like ancillary dwellings and granny flats and stuff like that, there's already scope in the rules. And to Maria's point, I think in the planning system at the moment, I've worked in 5 different councils over the course of 23 years. It's council by council. I've been involved in lots of different planning discussions across councils, and I see them facilitating that stuff, like, to use Scott's language, at different speeds and with different appetites. And I think things like a housing crisis or a rental crisis or an affordability crisis generally hasn't come into the design thinking of a planner. And so I can't remember who it was before, but someone said, it's a different thing to have a display home where someone's like umming and ahhing on the colour relative to this person hasn't got somewhere to live. Do you know? And I think we need to get past that in our planning system. I'm not entirely sure how to do that, like, categorically when you've got 68 councils. Maybe AI plays a role. Yeah,
I think, without reflecting too much on the Minister's words this morning, I mean, the reality is the very solid planning reasons to phase out walk-up flats have been a enormous issue in the lack of housing diversity now. Like, it's been entirely well-intentioned and with enormous horrible consequence at the end. Whilst we get some microphones out and get to some questions, I said we've got room for another 20 minutes or so before we go to our final presentations. I was just going to close with, Vas, the enormously important role that Homestart plays. It's also equally a sign of the market failure beyond Homestart and how bad everything is. 1 in 4 is an incredible number in terms of what that market presence is in that first homeowner space. What does a functioning sector look like in terms of where does Homestart want to be in that space, and what does ideal look like, I guess?
Yeah, good question. And before I answer it, probably the piece that I will call out about Homestart that not everyone always realise. First, it's not just first home buyers that we do. We help a lot of people, but also we're not someone's forever lender. either. So we are really transitional. We help people get into home ownership, and one of, the favourite things I like to say to, when new people join Homestart is, we get to celebrate our customers twice. We celebrate them when they, achieve home ownership, and then we celebrate them when they leave. If anyone's ever worked in finance here, we celebrate when someone refinances and leaves us, because that means, for that individual, we've helped them get in the door, get their, financial stability, whatever it is that they needed, and then they're ready to refinance and go out to a mainstream lender. We take that money and lend it to the next person. And that's a really important role that we play in the community here. That people are transitioning through us. We're a part of that ecosystem. So if I think about what does that really look like, we're always going to be playing a role in the market. And I think for us, it's really on those people who are shut out. And who don't have hope, don't have that, don't believe that they can. That's the role we should be playing. And listening to Scott earlier on when he talked about what Housing Australia doing, and he talked about the guarantee schemes, which is low deposit, and he talked about the Help to Buy scheme, that is, a shared equity solution coming to the market. That's actually really great to hear, because that's the space we've been playing in and helping, so many people here. If others in the market are doing that, that means we can start looking at who is being left behind. And that's the role that, we'll continue to play, is to fill that gap of who's being left behind. It is the lower income, absolutely the lower income earners in that space. And then how do we help with the different types of product that are being brought to the market, and how do we help fund that, and how do we help solve for the the challenges that someone faces there to purchase an apartment, for example. Actually, some of those upfront costs are much higher because a private developer wants a 10% deposit up front, and they need that before they can get their funding, quite often, before they can get the development off the ground. But if you're talking about a $500,000, $600,000 apartment, you're talking about $50,000, $60,000. How many people in that low to moderate income space have that money available to put down as an upfront deposit? Yeah. And then achieve the house in 2 or 3 years' time. So there's a whole heap of other challenges for us to solve. So for me, success looks like us continuing to find those areas in the market and those people who are shut out. Give them hope that home ownership's an option for them, and then for us to continue to solve for those while the rest of the market helps everybody else. And just
on that still. That has been the history of Homestart in terms of choosing a cohort where there's been a failure. Like, that's how the graduate loan and the Cert 4 stuff. Do you just want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, our graduate loan, has been around for a number of years now, and that's really us looking at what is the risk. So, earlier on the panel talked about managing the risks. As a lender, we do the same thing. So what are the risks associated with lending money to any individual? And we did some research some time ago that identified that somebody who has a Certificate 3 or higher, I think, is it Certificate 3? Yeah, it's a Certificate 3 or...
Used to be 4, I was wrong, sorry.
No, that's all right. It's late in the day on a Friday. That, for those individuals, actually, they've got the ability to earn, and their ability to earn as they continue through their careers and their working lives will likely continue to increase, and that's actually the saving for a deposit that is the barrier that they need to overcome. So, allowing them to achieve home ownership with a lower deposit, they will have the capacity to continue, to make repayments, repay the loan, and then eventually move on from Homestart. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll start with some questions now. We've got a solid 20 minutes, so don't need to rush. I'll start with Maddie Steele, whose birthday it was yesterday, so happy birthday, Maddie.
Wow, okay, thanks, Matt. Christy, I loved your example about what you were doing in London and designing, and how different the mix was there and the different mentality. The thing that came to mind for me is we're spending a lot of time and a lot of money building houses for cars. And I want to know whose job is it to take control of that conversation, to change the narrative, talk about how we're going to live differently in the future, because, it's a lot of space, time and money going into building houses for cars.
Well, firstly, happy birthday. And then secondly, well done for bravely bringing up the C word. And we can hear council's perspective on this as well. How long have we got?
As long as you want.
Look, it's interesting. I mean, I reflect on what we've been doing down at Tonsley with Junction, and we started working on that site in 2020. And we were all talking about driverless vehicles, and we wouldn't need to provide car parking and blah, blah, blah. We're 5 years later and we're still not there. And it's really interesting. So, I mean, the current code, which is possibly about to change for the affordable rental or affordable product, is 0.3 ratio, which is a largely discounted rate compared to any other residential accommodation. And that largely goes back to another acronym, the TODs, the Transport Orientated Developments. A lot of this product is right next to a train station. The whole argument that you don't need to have a car because you're really well serviced. It's a little bit like that transition from living in a home with a front yard, backyard into an apartment, is going from having 3 cars in the driveway to not having one, or having your bike. I think until people start living like that, they're probably going to resist it. We're such a convenience town. Adelaide is so road dominated. There was a fabulous presentation by a lady, I've forgotten her name, sorry, from Toronto, and she was talking about all of their high density development and had this beautiful aerial photo, and it all popped up above where all of the transport hubs were, and in between was just this sea of green. And we just haven't got the foundational planning right here as a city to incentivise people to not have a car yet. But it's time. I don't know what the answer is. There's so much resident pushback on car parking that we're fighting a really, really hard battle on any of this medium to high scale density stuff going up. The things that we talk about, I was saying this earlier, traffic and waste, right? Waste collection is another massive thing. Bin presentation areas on curbs, we talk about that for so much of the time. But I wouldn't mind, Matt, giving your lens on this. I mean, I'm pro no cars, I'll just say that. But someone who works at council is probably unable to be that.
Jump into Matt's defence first. Given there aren't any state transport bureaucrats in the room, we can have a crack at them first. But I was involved in former roles in the formation of the TODs and electrification, etc. I think it's enormously poor public policy to tell people to live like this with having this amenity years before you built the amenity. And I think one of the huge problems is asking someone to move into a car for a future train line or tram line that's not there yet. You haven't changed the behaviour upon which moving people in. We're not a mass transit city. We're fast learning that it's a bad idea to have a one-way train station that you can't get out the other way, and what that looks like, and even things like Port Stanvac now that the Minister mentioned this morning, like the capacity to service Port Stanvac on a train line is already constrained by the one-way train stations. So we've got some big grown-up state and federal discussions about reliability of public transport for people to use, I think, before yelling at the resident and saying, use the shitty thing that's there. So, anyway, Matt, I try to give you some cover, but go hard.
Thanks, no, they're good points. And I think just to, again, it's a bit of a defence against the NIMBY stuff, right? Some of these parking problems and traffic problems are real. Yeah. Like there are streets in Charles Sturt just by the virtue of the infill, where you turn down the street, you've literally got to get out of the car, fold your mirrors in, and then drive down the middle. And it's like, imagine a backyard suburb that's kind of like school drop-off, like all the time. There's no peak and off time. It's just like that all the time, and that's what it's like to live there now. Probably not uncommon for residents to drive around for God knows how long looking for a car park. And I think that the infrastructure-led solutions to the car problem, they'll continue. There'll always be discussions about that stuff. At Charles Sturt, our council's just signed off. We had this idea. It's actually just been put in the state transport strategy that's been released. We're looking at service-led options around this stuff. We're about to go to market looking for, again, a bit of a partner to come and help us. Some ideas we've got are the mobility as a service type model where there might be rideshare, public transport. The scooters that bill got through yesterday, I think. So now you can legally ride a scooter on the road.
I fell off one. I don't ride them anymore.
Yeah, I can picture that. So then imagine like if you had an app which was pay as you go, and if you're here and you want to go there, you go, what's closest to me? So we're not, and then you can click and use that vehicle, whatever it is, to go. And what you're not doing is saying don't have a car. You're going, you might not need to own one yourself. And we're thinking, well, what if you got rid of 10% of the cars? Yeah. Just because you didn't need one all the time?
Yeah. Or the second or the third car.
Yeah, that's right. And the thought of my girls who are 10 and 12 living with me till they're 34 and me having 4 cars at home, that's just depressing. The other thing, the other thing we're looking at is renting your driveway in some of the hotspots. So there's a company now that's got an app. You can sign up to the app and you can rent your driveway during the day for $20, just like you would in the city. And that's kind of taken off. So we're looking to bring that company in and go, hey, what if council promoted you? Because I can see no one really knows you exist. Spots around the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, as an example, in those back streets, there's some retirees in there that have stopped driving. Their driveway's empty all day. It's no skin off their nose. So I think, to answer your question, I don't think in our generation we'll get rid of the cars. That might be 3 or 4 away. But the infrastructure-led solutions, I think they'll keep going. I'm not sure how effective they are, but some of the service-led stuff that's emerging with new technology is really quite interesting.
We're in complete tangents now. We were talking about EV charging also being another built-in sectoral disadvantage to the rental system. Do you want to talk through where your thinking is on that?
Yeah, we're looking at a network of EV charging units on Stobie poles and on our streetlights. The Jolt stations that you see around, ones like that, they're about 60.
The ones that the Lord Mayor thinks are ugly, but okay, yeah.
They're also about $60,000 to put in because you have to excavate. With the pole-mounted units, they're about $400 to mount. And you literally drive up to an on-street park, plug your car in, do your thing, come out, and it's done. And I think from a rental perspective, things like solar panels and batteries, the renters have missed out because the landlord won't front the capital. The in-home charging in the garages, they'll probably miss out too because the landlord needs to give permission or front the capital or they can't afford it. So it's like these, the council's role in that space is this safety net, trying to give people access to those savings. I think the rental discussion, notwithstanding the price, would be very different if they never got an electricity bill again or didn't have to pay to fill up their car with, let's say, electricity. You know, what if you weren't paying an electricity bill at all? Your rent might be more palatable.
I think we'll all end up with some EV road user charges at some point, but that's okay. 2 more questions, and then I think we can all wrap up, get through our exciting, innovation, uplifting, optimistic speed talks at the end of the afternoon and then get over the road. So are there 2 other questions before we head off, or any other? Ines? Sorry, Nadi's just behind you, Ines, sorry.
Thank you. My question is for you, Christy, in terms of thinking through the design features for these properties for CHPs, what is the one that you'd be the saddest to give up? What is the thing that for you to make these livable and affordable as homes for people? What's the thing that's most important to you?
Placemaking. So there's lots of apartment buildings for different uses, whether CHPs are involved or not. But something that creates a sense of belonging, especially if you're renting, to make people feel like they're not a transient occupant. So creating opportunities for people to have to interact. That's one of the, loneliness hasn't come up yet today, but that's one of the big challenges here too. And it's one of the things that apartment living can offer if you get the place right. If you do create, you've got your bike clubs, you've got maybe a little common area that people can play games in or connect. I think that's the thing, and I think that's where I started again with community and connection and making people feel like they belong somewhere. That's the most important thing.